Hello and welcome to the last episode of Odds and Ends. In this episode, we will cover the domestication of 5 different tropical crops: Tamarillo, ice cream bean, Guarana, Brazil nut, and Cupuassu. You'll start with Tamarillo or tree tomato. The tree tomato goes by the scientific name Solanum bacatum. It's a small tree that's cultivated for its edible, slightly acidic, tomato-like fruit. It's popular as a niche crop in its native home of the Andean region of South America, as well as New Zealand and the Mediterranean. In North America, it's only considered a minor fruit oddity. In the paper I'm citing, Dr. Pablo G. Acosta Quincidada studied the genetic diversity of the species to find out its origins, center of domestication, for possible new breeding strategies in the future. Here are the results of his efforts. Based on genetic information obtained by the researchers, within the domesticated populations, there's high levels of genetic diversity between plants within a population, but very little in terms of genetic differences between land races. It was also found that although most of the wild specimens of tree tomato have been found within Bolivia, high levels of genetic diversity and low genetic differentiation are found within Ecuador, indicating that Bolivia, despite being the center of origin, has less genetic differentiation than what is found in Ecuador, indicating that Ecuador is the center of differentiation between populations for tree tomato. This low variation between geographic origins within the Andean land races is plausibly due to the continuous exchange of seeds between different cultures, which would allow for continuous crossbreeding between land-race populations, preventing genetic differentiation from happening. Now on to ice cream bean. Now on to the ice cream bean. The ice cream bean is a series of different species belonging to the Inga genus. The most common species used is the species Inga edulis, which I'll call IE for short. This is a diploid tropical tree legume that's pollinated by birds and flying insects and bats, and it produces very large beans, specifically bean pods that have their seeds coated in a sweet gel, which tastes apparently like ice cream. The managed population seem to be domesticated, as the Amazonian species, in its domesticated form, has far larger bean pods than does the wild form. Unlike most other species of domesticated crops, the domesticated form of IE still has 80% of the genetic diversity of the wild population, higher than the expected and typical 65%. This is likely because of the high tree density within plantations within the Amazon, and a close proximity to the wild progenitors, which allow for greater genetic diversity within these populations. Now on to Guarana. Guarana belongs to the genus Paullinia, and to the species Paullinia cupana. This crop was domesticated in the region between the lower Tapatos and lower Madeira rivers within the central Brazilian Amazonia region. The first European note of Guarana was in 1669, where it was observed that the Satri Maui people were the original cultivators of this vine. There is a myth that surrounds this fruit. There was once a woman whose name I cannot pronounce because it's very long. It was basically about a family who guarded their sister jealously because they wanted to keep her knowledge of plants all to themselves. She was also the owner of a magic Brazil nut tree. One day a small snake seduced her and impregnated her, resulting in a snake-human hybrid of some sort. The TikTok brothers managed to concoct a scheme to kill the kid, which ended with the boy being decapitated. She took out the left eye of her decapitated son and planted it in the ground, producing the false Guarana, and then took out the right eye and planted in the ground to produce the true Guarana. This myth may ironically have some basis in fact, though probably unintentionally. Based on a study of the genetics of the Guarana, it seems to indicate that the Guarana is actually a hybrid between two different genuses of the same family, because most false Guaranas, or different Paullinia species, have a chromosome number of 24, but the cultivated guarana has 210 chromosomes. The number of chromosomes and the morphology of these chromosomes suggest a combination of a tetraploid and a hexaploid species formed through hybridization. This sort of mirrors the myth based on the work of the paper I'm citing, given that this species is morphologically dissimilar to the other species of Polliniana, or false guarana, and was likely formed through hybridization between two different genera. This mirrors the snake-human hybridization, and the plantain of both the false and the true guarana, although in this case I think that the researcher in question may be reaching a little bit, but still makes for a fun video. As for when the domestication occurred, it is known that 4,000 years ago, within the Andes region, food production systems became more important than foraging. The original planters of this crop arrived in their current location likely 2,000 years ago. This indicates that the maximum time period for when it was domesticated was 2,000 years ago. With current genetic evidence, it may have been even more recent, however, due to very limited genetic differentiation, estimated about 600 years ago, so the time frame of domestication is between 2,000 years ago and 600 years ago. Now on to Brazil nut. Brazil nut is a nut tree that belongs to the species Bifoliata excelsa. As of right now, Brazil nut is largely propagated via human interaction. This is indicated by the lack of old-growth forests in many areas, and several of these populations have large seeds, suggesting domestication. Based on the genetic evidence surrounding Brazil nut, 94% of the genetic variation is found within populations, and only 6% was found between populations, a phenomenon not found in wild specimens of any tree, indicating that this has been domesticated for quite some time. Some of all the genetic research seems to suggest that human beings were the primary distributors of Brazil nut throughout the Holocene. As such, the exact origin of the Brazil nut remains unknown, but it's likely to originate somewhere in southeastern Amazonia. Now on to our last crop, Cupuassu. Cupuassu is known by its scientific name Pheobroma graniflora. If this sounds familiar, then you'll be interested to know that this species is actually in the same genus as the cacao plant, although cultivated for its edible fruit rather than its beans. It was initially speculated that it was domesticated sometime before European conquest, and is found naturally in the southern and southeastern Para region of the Amazon rainforest. Recent genetic studies suggest that it may have been domesticated relatively recently. This was confirmed by a document by Padre Giaolo Daniel in the mid-1700s, who affirmed that Cupuassu was not cultivated by native peoples or colonists, and suggested that it might be worthwhile to domesticate this crop. Although it is known that the Kapur people had small home gardens where they grew the species, although for what reason it remains unknown. In the mid-1900s, Alfredo Duque commented that Cupuassu was rare in western Amazonia, and most of the market was done through extraction from the wild, however rare it was. Using genetic studies, it was found that in cultivated populations there is less within population genetic diversity of 70% compared to the 80 to 90% found in most tropical trees, and high levels of inbreeding, and there's very distinct genetic differences between populations. This is due to the fact that their natural pollinators and seed dispersers do not spread their seeds or pollen very far. This allows for genetic divergence among inbred populations. It is possible that the original seed distributors of this species are long extinct, and as of right now, Cupuassu is now reliant on other less efficient means of dispersing their seeds. And that concludes everything for this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to me on BitChute for a greater variety of content, 4 videos a week. And thank you to all my subscribers on both platforms. I appreciate it.